Integrated agriculture, produce more for our country and also for export. We should also invest in proper roads so that we connect our areas and ensure goods and services are properly and timely distributed or taken where they are required, Mr. Speaker. And then lastly, we must invest more on health, because when you have a sick nation, then you are completely compromising all gains on matters with development. With that, I submit, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honorable Kimani Kuria, then we will take all the time on my left.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the Liaisons Committee report on the Supplementary Announcements number 2 of the financial year 24-25. This, Honorable Speaker, this review is a key component of fiscal oversight that is ensuring that government expenditures remain within the principles of fiscal responsibility, efficiency, and macroeconomic stability. Honorable Speaker, as a custodians of public finance, we must balance what we call expenditure rationalizations with the need to stimulate economic growth while we maintain fiscal consolidation to avoid unsustainable debt accumulation. Honorable Speaker, the Kenya Kwanza administration did promise to make sure they lower the ratio of debt as a percentage of GDP. And you can see even the projections of our BPS that's hoping to reduce our debt as a percentage of GDP to 4.3%, Honorable Speaker. This rationalization through supplementary estimates 2 seek further to lower that debt as a percentage of GDP as per the promise of this administration that we are going to live within our means, Honorable Speaker. As at 31st of January 2025, our total revenue collection stood at 1.58 trillion shillings, which fell short by 110 billion shillings of our target for this financial year. However, Honorable Speaker, it is important to note that out of this revenue underperformance, 103 billion was on what we call ordinary revenue, but we saw an overperformance of what we call appropriations of the aid, or A&A, by around 3.1 billion shillings. So although we're seeing our revenues increase, we're still below the target. But most importantly, our collections as A&A, which we call non-tax revenue, Honorable Speaker, they actually grew by more than 3.1 billion shillings. And this is a great indicator that perhaps if we went into digitizing our programs, like you've seen on platforms like eCitizen, we could actually generate more revenue. And the move from tax revenue to non-tax revenue is also showing that it's reducing the burden of taxation on Kenyans, Honorable Speaker. Kenya's recent shortfalls, Honorable Speaker, that are indicated on the tax system is neither buoyant nor elastic enough to capture full economic potential. Our rate of growth in GDP is not represented in our growth in revenues, which means that there are critical inefficiencies that must be fixed, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, just to explain a bit, tax buoyancy is what we refer to how tax revenues grow in response to GDP growth, where we say a buoyancy ratio of less than 1 indicates that the tax system is not responsive enough to economic growth. And in the contrast, we say that the tax revenues above that, it means that they are over, like what we call over taxation, Honorable Speaker. So our tax buoyancy ratio, is actually showing that our revenues are not correspondent with our growth in our GDP, which raises serious questions on inefficiencies and leakages in our revenue mobilization. Honorable Speaker, to do this, we are recommending the following in the report that we submitted to the Liaison Committee and as tabled in this House, that we must strengthen tax compliance and administration through some of the following areas. One is enhanced digital tax collection systems, including e-taxation and AI-driven audits. Honorable Speaker, we should go away from the regular book audits to now using technology that AI audits, Honorable Speaker, to audit tax collection, Honorable Speaker, broadening tax base to ensure and reduce over-reliance on pay-as-you-earn and corporate taxes. Honorable Speaker, what we have done over time, especially due to not as increasing our tax base, has been over-reliance on what we call pay-slip taxes, Honorable Speaker. And this, Honorable Speaker, has a net effect on what we call the consolidation fund. Because one of the recommendations that we're making is that we have created too many funds outside the consolidated fund, which has two challenges. One, withdrawals of funds outside the consolidated fund does not have the purview or does not require the approval of the controller of budget. That's number one. Number two, Honorable Speaker, our debts, obligations are paid from the CFS, the Consolidated Fund Account, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, this creation of these funds, and one of the things that we are recommending is that if we audit all these funds, and especially the ones that have achieved their mandate, to be folded up, or to cap the limit of the amount sent to this particular fund so that that money can go to the consolidated fund. Because, Honorable Speaker, this is what we have seen as a result of straining the personal report, Honorable Speaker, by trying to compensate on what should go to the consolidated fund, whereas many collections are going to different funds that are outside the purview of mostly the approval of the control of budget, Honorable Speaker. Our total GDP, our total revenue, Honorable Speaker, for 24-25 is projected to be at 3 trillion shillings, which is 17.6% of our GDP. All the revenue has been revised downwards in the new estimates to 2.58 trillion shillings, a reduction of 50.5 billion shillings reduction from the previous estimates that we approved in supplementary one, Honorable Speaker. One of the things that we are recommending is that the Kenya national tax rates must strike a balance between revenue maximization and economic growth stimulation by ensuring that we that we grow investment and, Honorable Speaker, discourage tax avoidance. Honorable Speaker, we are making the following policy recommendations: that we must strengthen public expenditure and financial accountability mechanisms to ensure that revenue estimates remain realistic and data-driven. And two, to improve expenditure tracking systems to align public spending with revenue collection cycles, Honorable Speaker. The reason why we tend to have these supplementary budgets all the time is also because we tend to overpredict, overstate our expected revenues, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, once now these revenues are not, it's not necessarily because, of course, there are inefficiencies, but this overstretching of the oversetting of our revenues means that we also over budget on our expenditure side, Honorable Speaker. And then reality comes and hits us that, oh, we do not have enough revenues, Honorable Speaker, to raise this expenditure. And it's notably so because every contribution here has been, we want more allocation for our roads, we want more allocation for water, we want more allocation for health, we want more allocation on critical services like energy, Honorable Speaker. But then that tends now to continuously stretch the budget on the other side. And what does National Treasury do? What does this House do? We now then, to handle that pressure, overstate the revenue, Honorable Speaker. And towards now, the middle of the year, towards the end of the year, we do not have the resources that we need to finance these expenditures, Honorable Speaker, and then end up, Honorable Speaker, on the pending means, Honorable Speaker. Government spending, Honorable Speaker, must be aligned with principles of allocative efficiency and intertemporal budget concept to prevent unsustainable fiscal imbalances, Honorable Speaker. The total next expenditures, Honorable Speaker, had said has been reduced, but Honorable Speaker, we saw in this particular supplementary one of the greatest use of Article 223 payments, Honorable Speaker. Although they are not unconstitutional, there is nothing illegal in what National Treasury did in making these Article 223 payments, Honorable Speaker. But you're saying there is need for better planning to make sure that we do not use Article 223 payments to make expenditures, Honorable Speaker, that could have been predicted, Honorable Speaker. Because, the Committee of Finance and National Planning in our first year of term, Honorable Speaker, was the first time we actually made a contribution to this to reject an Article 223 payment. But, Honorable Speaker, the problem with Article 223 payment, even when they come to Parliament for approval and you reject them, it's almost an exercise in futility, because that payment has already been disbursed anyway. And they're not against the Constitution, because Article 223 of the Constitution is the one that gives National Treasury the power to allocate and disburse resources up to 10% of our budget, Honorable Speaker, without having to seek or without having to seek Parliament approval, but they have to come and report or seek Parliament approval after a month, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, One of the notable payments that were made from our State Department was money that was given for Kenya Revenue Authority to cater for operations and salary shortfalls. Another one was to East African Development Bank, Honorable Speaker, for data analysis, Honorable Speaker. And these payments, Honorable Speaker, after we analyzed them, we found that they merited and we did approve. But we have strong recommendation that maybe we need to reduce the amounts, the percentage that the Treasury is allowed to disperse through Article 2 to 3 from 10% maybe to around 2 or 3%, or have National Assembly seek to have them seek prior approval for expenditure above 5 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. One of the great economists I like, called Wagner, states that economies develop, public expenditure increase as a share of GDP. However, spending must be directed towards productive investments rather than unproductive recurrent costs, Honorable Speaker. And I think the issue of budgetary allocation has been spoken greatly in this House. And whereas budget allocation is a political process, we must balance between our political interests, Honorable Speaker, and efficiencies. And we are seeing, Honorable Speaker, and this is the target, the challenge that we're giving to all committee chairs, and especially the ones that we've just been elected into, especially departmental chairs, Honorable Speaker, to not just balance political interests, but most importantly, allocate resources where there is efficiencies, Honorable Speaker, so that we have a budget that speaks to our country and speaks to growth of our GDP, Honorable Speaker. When you check, Honorable Speaker, for Article 2 to 3 payments, and actually check the best practice, for example, from UK, Honorable Speaker, they cap it at 2%, and there is very proper parliamentary scrutiny over this particular payment, Honorable Speaker. Another challenge you found was, Honorable Speaker, in this supplementary estimate, and I think especially for beneficiaries of the equalization fund, this information is critical to you, that since the establishment of the equalization fund, only 13.43 billion shillings out of 62.4 billion shillings has been transferred. The 24 allocation has reduced the allocation of equalization fund from 8 billion to 2.5 billion shillings, which cites a 5.5 billion shillings reduction, Honorable Speaker. Is this reduction meant to reduce or to deny the equalization, the marginalized areas, these funds? The answer is not, Honorable Speaker. But it's good to know that this Honorable House, 2 weeks ago, through the Committee of Finance and National Planning, did pass a new law, because what lacked was also a legal framework. So with now a legal framework, that we're also saying, Honorable Speaker, and I remember your contribution on this particular debate, Honorable Speaker, saying that if this equalization fund must meet, because the drafters of our Constitution intended that those areas that have been marginalized, that there be an affirmative action for them to get closer to the other areas of this republic. But you're saying, Honorable Speaker, the allocation of these particular funds is too thinly stretched to have any meaningful impact on these areas. When, Honorable Speaker, you take a county and you allocate 10 million shillings for a dam, that million shillings will never complete that dam, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, yes, there is money for that equalization fund, but it's so thinly stretched that even if the equalization fund would last for another 20 years, Honorable Speaker. And I think it's also important to note that equalization fund is coming to an end in 2030, Honorable Speaker. That if we do not allocate those resources in a way that they have a meaningful impact on those particular areas, Honorable Speaker, we will always continue talking about areas that are forever marginalized, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we made the following non-financial committee recommendation, Honorable Speaker, that one, as I said, Article 2 to 3 payments should have more stronger parliamentary oversight mechanism, that we must ensure there's digital revenue collection to improve tax buoyancy and compliance, that we must ensure the implementation of Public Procurement Disposal Act of 2024, that this Honorable House passed in December, to ensure that there's transparency and value for money in our procurement processes, that we must accelerate Kenya's transition from cash to accrual accounting system to ensure that there is financial reporting accuracy, and, Honorable Speaker, lastly, to strengthen fiscal decentralization by expediting equalization fund disbursement through a predictable transfer formula, Honorable Speaker. Kenya stands at a crossroads, Honorable Speaker, where fiscal discipline must be enforced to ensure macroeconomic stability and ensure there is sustainable development. The revenue shortfall and expenditure reallocations, they call for a data driven decision making, robust fiscal policies, and we must ensure there is accountability. As Winston Churchill said, the price of greatness is responsibility. Let us therefore exercise our legislative duty with diligence and ensure that every shilling is spent with transparency and impact, Honorable Speaker. As we move to the Committee of the Whole of Supply on the budget, Honorable Speaker, I urge this House to scrutinize those votes and make sure they carry out their oversight role properly, ensure that resources are allocated as they should be, Honorable Speaker. And all of us that sit, especially in the oversight committees, ensure that we carry our oversight roles diligently. Because, Honorable Speaker, as you know, we all sit in very privileged situations where not other Kenyans do, to make sure we oversight not just revenue, but also expenditure, to make the budget and ensure that that money is spent fairly, efficiently, and there is value for money to the taxpayer. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Kimani Kuria is always very good listening to you on matters finance. I wanted to pick your mind on this allocation for public participation. I don't know whether you thought about it. That is ring-fenced at 3 billion.
Honorable Speaker,
what is the legal underpinning, and to what extent, in your view, does it distort the budget?
Honorable Speaker, public participation is enshrined in our Constitution. That for every legislation that has been put, there must be public participation. And the purpose of ring-fencing this money for public participation was so that when the budget committee, when they go to these rotating counties, I think they pick 5 counties every year, is that when those counties state what their priorities are for those counties, Honorable Speaker, it is not in vain. So the only thing that we need to make sure is that we need to put all, to scrutinize the projects on the public participation funds to make sure that they reflect the needs of the counties that that public participation exercise was carried into. The intention, Honorable Speaker, was that if every year they do 5 counties, in a cycle of 5 years, they would have done 25 counties. So in around 10 years, there would be enough affirmative action in every county in this country, in this country, Honorable Speaker. So it is enshrined in our Constitution, the need for public participation. We just need to make sure we have fiscal discipline, and as I said, balance, between political interest and making sure there is efficiency in budgetary allocation. Not just allocating because of our political interest, but ensuring there is efficiency, Honorable Speaker, and fairness in this allocation, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Now, the Honorable Catherine Omanyo, you will be followed by the Public Accounts Committee Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And then the Honorable Dr. Ivo Bara, because of gender considerations.
Thank you. Chair, I have gone through the supplementary budget and stuck my nose mostly on the irrigation and reclamation. And why I have stressed and highlighted irrigation, floods in Budalangi have been like a chorus every time we have rains, any downpour. I'm thinking this time the over 600 million that has been allocated to reclaim such areas should be put in use so we can decongest cities. If we barred the overflow that happens every time, that sweeps homes, crops, animals from any flooded areas, and built these wetlands, changed them into agricultural land, and also made sure that we develop such areas, a few factories and industries, then we will be creating jobs and making sure that our country, especially those areas that are underserved, get the same cake that people in places that are affluent get. Otherwise, bridging the gap between the poor and the rich might never be possible if we continue having leaders who are greedy, selfish, egocentric, thinking of just taking to only their areas. I was utterly demolished when I realized that budget committee, some few people sat somewhere and decided to allocate themselves, and not realizing that they were put there to represent Kenya and make sure that every sector, every region in Kenya gets a fair share of this cake. So I really want this irrigation and land reclamation to be done well, thinking of the future and making sure that this time what we do with that money stands. Not every year we go to Budalangi, there's no change. In fact, it is getting worse. I have visited a few areas like Sweden and Norway and Dubai, and I hear of these stories that once upon a time, this area was an island and it was flooded. And once upon a time, and it is still like Dubai, is a desert. But it's a tourist attraction center. In fact, one of the highest. Every minute, Dubai is receiving so many tourists to go and just enjoy the sceneries that they have created. So people who will be involved in this sector, they need to be passionate about changing the lives of Kenyans in such underserved areas. And then wealth distribution in our nation has been as a nightmare. We have very few, 10% of the Kenyan population that enjoy, that make sure that they control the economy. But the majority of Kenyans are wallowing in the miasma of poverty because it is unequal. The distribution of wealth is very unequal. And those who are wealthier hardly want to participate or support social programs in those low-income areas where we have more low-income individuals. So if we could do something, even those who employ, if we could have real minimum wage, then we would curb, people taking advantage of their employees, because you find that somebody can employ even a degree holder and pay them 15,000. We must have everything written well, yes, theoretically, but pragmatically, let it.
The supplementary budget is supposed to address expenditure which was not budgeted for, especially the emergencies. And therefore, if you want to reduce of expenditure or misuse of public resources, we need to get it right when it comes to supplementary budget. Because if we don't, then we encourage corruption and misuse of public resources. Mr. Speaker, I also want to join my colleagues who have requested that the 50 million that had been allocated for electricity connectivity be returned or put in the next budget, so that we find a way in which we can make the common Kenyan access the electricity. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to commend the liaison committee and support the second supplementary estimates for financial year 2024-2025. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Dr. Ivo Bara had been recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also contribute. At onset, let me also appreciate the liaison committee and support the report. Mr. Speaker, looking at it generally, supplementary budget is supposed to take care of some of the unforeseen expenditure that was not captured in the main budget. But looking generally at what has been presented here, there are certain gaps that we have noted. Mr. Speaker, the first one are the challenges on financial management. Mr. Speaker, it appears that we have a expenditure. Mr. Speaker, if you look at our revenue for the period under discussion, we have a 1.5+ billion revenue, but still have a shortfall of 110 billion for the period between July and December. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what could be the problem, but as been mentioned earlier that we appear to have a problem with the tools that we use for projection. It appears that our tools are outdated, and this is an area that we need to look at so that our projections going forward in future should be realistic. Mr. Speaker, we also seem to have a problem with the utilization of funds on the expenditure side. Mr. Speaker, we have to find a way of reducing unnecessary expenditure, particularly at a time when we have a shortfall on areas of training, of DMs, trips for large numbers of members of public service. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, is on the use of Article 223. Mr. Speaker, it appears that we have an overuse of Article 223 to the extent that the requests received amount to 88 billion. Mr. Speaker, what you are able to accommodate from Treasury is only 40. And even within our own committees, the list is long of commitments or promises that have been made, that we must be able to instill some financial discipline within ourselves. Going to my committee, which is education, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that the noise that we had within the sector, a few of the issues have been addressed in this supplementary budget. The first one is the CBA for the university staff, which was a promise. And I'm happy that we are able to, a promise is a debt, they say, that this, we are able to accommodate this within the supplementary, and we have a 4.3 billion allocation for the CBA for the university staff. University of Moi University and Egerton University, Mr. Speaker, were all in the news for the wrong reason. Moi University has a new management. As a committee, we met them, Mr. Speaker, and we've given them time to put the house in order and prepare a report to tell us exactly where they are with all the challenges that they had. And because of this, I'm happy that the liaison have been able to allocate 2 billion for the Moi University and Egerton. These are not the only ones with challenges, Mr. Speaker. We still have the other universities. We have TUK, we have Nairobi, and all this will come to the committee when we have a retreat to be able to look at how can we mitigate some of the problems that they have, and how can these problems be stopped from recurring. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that we have also allocated money for teacher promotions. And all of us, with the mandate of education, we know that there are teachers who have been out there not promoted for many years, 17 years, 10 years, not promoted. But a little has been put, and we still believe that we need to put in place, at least for them to be motivated, for those who have been in service, for those who have acted for years and can't be promoted because money is not available. And 17 billion has been put into the budget. School infrastructure, with the JSS, we are aware that most of them, there are no classes. Some teachers, some schools have used the primary school classrooms to put their JSS. But again here, there's some little money, 500 million has been, this is a little, but 500 has been put in this supplementary budget as we look for the main budget to see how the matter can be addressed. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I listened to what the Chair of Finance was saying about being happy about the A&A. And even within the education sector, we were informed that 15 billion will be raised from the sagas and including universities. But Mr. Speaker, our challenge was they were not able to produce the amount that they raised between July and December for us to assess the accuracy of their projections. And so we asked those institutions to be able to give us this information, even as we approve 15 billion as being A&A that has been received from this institution. Finally, for the examinations, there is 5.9 billion. And as a committee, Mr. Speaker, we said that exams are there every year. And it should not be treated as an emergency or unforeseen. That this must be factored every year when we are doing the budget because it is known. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, finally, I want to talk about the allocation of resources. Yesterday, we had a heated debate in this House about imbalances in the allocation of resources. Mr. Speaker, as a House, we need to take this very, very seriously. And when budgets are being presented, it must be itemized so that we know exactly where is it going. And even as we speak, there are those areas which have been left behind, Mr. Speaker. What do we do as a House? I believe that we need to have affirmative action for these areas that have been left behind. And there must be a threshold for areas that have received those resources. They should be stopped for a while and let these other ones catch up with a certain threshold being put by the committees, relevant committees. Even if you look at the teachers, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, there are areas that have more than enough teachers. That's the reality. The teachers don't even have enough work in the schools where they are. And yet there are areas that the shortfall is as much as 6,000 plus. What are we doing about this? And this is where I'm saying that affirmative action must be put in place for these areas to catch up, because all of us pay taxes. Thank you very much. Once again, I support.
Very well. And on the list here is